fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream. Good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which we meet and on which this meeting is being held, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I now call on Pastor Rob McGarry to deliver the opening prayer. Rob.
Thanks, Mark. It's a privilege to come again today and to share with you. There's a scripture in Jeremiah which says that we often don't know the attitudes and issues that we're actually holding in our own hearts, the motivations that drive us, the effect of past events on our worldview, things that we don't realise about ourselves. I'm 63, I'm still discovering stuff about myself I never knew. One of the people we understand the least is the person we look at in the mirror, and we sometimes don't realise we don't understand ourselves even. Hebrews 4 and verse 12 states that as we open ourselves to the things that Jesus spoke about, we begin to see these things, and sometimes that's pretty scary. And it gives us a chance actually to deal with them. And this is actually what it says. For the word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of our heart. Not as in saying judging us as in saying you've failed, but actually just revealing to you the thoughts and attitudes of your heart. In Isaiah 30 verse 15 it says, For thus says the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest you shall be saved, in quietness and confidence shall be your strength. For us, we have a sense of being happy with ourselves when we've dealt with our attitudes. We become more at peace. And we have confidence to speak freely because we are happy with who we are and happy to accept other people's views. And as I get older, I'm happy to hear some other views and just be happy about it and say, well, I've got a different view, but that's okay. As we allow these things to be dealt with, we stop reacting to situations, getting angry, going over the top. We're able to have good conversations, two-way conversations that become fruitful. We make good progress as we treat each other with respect and listen and hear each other. I aspire to speak out of quietness and confidence and being able to just share my heart and hear others. I'm still a work in progress. If I live to 100, maybe I'll make some good progress. So I wonder this morning if we can consider that and be open to the things that Jesus said, because often they're things that we need to hear. Can we pray? Lord, I just thank you for this council and thank you for the work they do. And many times people misjudge them. But Lord, I just thank you for them. I pray this morning that your peace would be here. And Lord, that people would speak in quietness and confidence and assurance. And Lord, would be happy to look at the person in the mirror knowing that, hey, I'm okay with God and with who I am. So Father, just pray your peace would be here, that this would be a fruitful meeting, that would be great collaboration, good discussion, good sharing, listening to each other. And we just thank you for this council. Bless this council, Lord. Let it be a council that's really fruitful and people look back on and say this was such a great council and what they achieved. We thank you for this time this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, do we have any apologies? Take that as a no. Yes, we do, Councillor. Oh yeah, CEO James Gott, of course. Thank you, Ms Sands. Declaration of conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Are there any conflicts to declare? That's a no. Okay, we'll move on to item 1, confirmation of minutes of the meeting on the 13th of May 2021. Would somebody move that those minutes are true and accurate record? Councillor Chewy moved, Councillor Pervin second. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 2, any business arising from those minutes? No business arising, councillors? Okay. We'll move on to item 3, asset sustainability, 3.1, page 31, the CCR capital report, and Mr. Smart is listed to deliver. Might be Mr. Goodman. Mr Goodman's going to deliver this report. Morning, Mr Goodman.
Morning, Mr Mayor, councillors.
Good morning, Mr Goodman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Unfortunately, Mr Smart's been delayed elsewhere and is unable to be here on time to deliver this report this morning, councillors. So I'll do my best. Councillors, there's the 17th of May of the total current capital budget. Council expended 40.2 million, including commitments, which is around just under 80% of the deliverable program. The projects completed last month. I guess we should first acknowledge the adverse weather conditions facing the teams in delivery of capital works within the last month. I know some councillors were out looking at the Upper Darragee Road project and got some up-to-date information on weather impacts on that particular project, but of course those conditions apply right across our region. But of the, there were some projects that did get to the stage of completion and within the last month, and that is Wongaling Beach Library, Bingle Bay Campground amenities renewal, River Drive Caravan Park, a number of solar projects across the region, Fitzgerald Esplanade Power, transfer station at Stodders Hill, the staff fit out, re-roof at Innisfail Dog Pound, and a water main renewal in Tully and Bryant Street between Mars and Ross Street, Ross Lane. I would say that there's been some further movement in reducing our risk of projects that are externally funded with a requirement for completion by 30th of June. The Deputy Mayor raised in general business at the last meeting that we had an extension for Upper Darragee Road. There's also been further extensions for some of our footpath works. That funding is now takes us through to September. I guess the outstanding issues, I guess where there remains risk, is a couple of smaller projects within Works for Queensland. Just sought some additional clarification on that this morning, and most of those we have the capacity to spend the money, but we're not convinced that with the prices on board that we would be delivering good value for money. So we're in discussion with the state at the moment to talk about projects or an agreement in a way that we could deliver those projects that delivers best value for money for our community and for the state and the expenditure of their money. And those discussions are ongoing. So in terms of the scale of those, much less than those issues which were associated with certainly Upper Darragee. Councillors, if you have any specific questions, I'll do my best. I know Mr Sanders is at the back of the room as well. I might call on his expertise.
Mr Goodman, I'd take you to page 35. Compliment on River Drive Caravan Park. It's come up absolutely beautiful, and I note the first caravan was parked in there yesterday, so the first client since the opening is in place. I also note that Hadrill Park nearby is very close to final delivery, but the turning lane issue with main roads, it says that the commencement date is July 21 and completion August 21. Will Hadrill Park be held up until that turning lane's complete?
I know Mr Jones is in the room here. We are waiting, as the last update I had, for final confirmation on approval for that works with main roads, and so until that is approved, We don't have a date on that. Until that is approved, it has the potential to delay the users actually getting in there and using that facility.
Yep, okay, thank you. And while we're on caravan parks, several councillors have been down to look at the Greenway Caravan Park. I note in the report that there's a completion date of June 21. Is that still on track?
We would need we'd need exceptional performance actually between now and the end of June for us to deliver that. In fact, that is one of the issues. Has been a delay in the delivery of some of the power for that project. Yeah, that's a real mess down there, and it's one of those projects that has been significantly impacted by our current weather, trying to continue to do the work to try and meet the deadlines, but also there's a lot of sort of not. The ground conditions there weren't anticipated. The extent of mill ash that's been buried under that facility over time, while we knew it was there, the extent of that was not anticipated. So, but let's acknowledge it looks a mess now. I can assure councillors with a couple of weeks of sunshine and us getting in there and doing some work, it will turn around completely, and we'll get that as a good functioning caravan park in the near future.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Any questions, councillors, for Mr Goodman? Councillor Baines.
Well, thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Goodman, well, one's a compliment. I went to the, Councillor Chewy and I attended upon the new meeting rooms at the Mission Beach Library, and I had the opportunity to catch up with some members of the Disability Awareness Group, and they were very, very complimentary on the disabled toilets that have been established in the library and adjacent to the new meeting room. So they asked me to please pass their personal congratulations on to yourselves and your team. And second point, Mr Mayor, it's important, I think, to make the point around these extensions that we've got from June 30 out to September. Doesn't necessarily mean the job's going to take until September to be done. Would that be correct?
Through the chair, that you are correct.
Yes.
That means the funding we have until September, but our emphasis will still continue to deliver the project as quickly as we can.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, sorry Dave, just going back to Greenway Caravan Park, I went down there and had a look myself. Is there any potential for the toilet block to have some undercover area put out the front, where, especially where that beautiful, it's a very nice building model. I went down there and checked it out. It's going to do the job, but at the front I noticed that nice timber wheelchair access is actually out in the weather. Yeah, I just wondered if there was any direction for that to be covered.
Through the chair, that's covering the wheelchair ramp or the disability ramp is not in the scope as it sits at the moment, but we certainly can have a look at that, Councillor Millwood, and provide some advice back on cost implications for that.
Any further questions? Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, through the chair. Dave, just carrying on from the previous. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, just carrying on from the previous speaker. I've had many a look at the van park, and I know weather's been against you. To me, it looks like it needs a couple of foot of topsoil to build that up a bit, because that is real spew. It's been built in a swamp, and we've used over the years, previous councils have used a lot of mill ash, and I think that's what's caused a lot of the trouble, correct?
Through the chair, yes, I agree with you that mill ash has caused a lot of issues. Once we can get it dried out and on what your suggestion was, a couple of feet of
600 mil of topsoil. I saw plenty yesterday where Nicholas and I were on a job, and there's plenty of it.
Yeah, a bit of basically need to create a bridge over the top of that, and it's actually undisturbed and without heavy machinery on there. That's performed quite well over the years, and for the last I think it's a couple of years now, we've had some significant caravans, Winnebago type vehicles in there and driving over that with no real issues, and that's had a fairly actually a fairly thin, what I would call a crust on top of that mill ash, and it's performed quite well. So yeah, we've had some heavy machinery in there, much more load on that than you would normally anticipate in a caravan park. And we'll get it back to that. But yes, it certainly needs something to go over the top of that to bridge that. We can't have it won't function with people just driving straight over the top
And
of that.
Mr. Goodman, moving on, page 33, I see your Baldwin Creek water reservoir. It's a great success to yourself and all those around you. Is that completed now? It says March 21, but I knew there were a few finalising problems there. Are they all fixed?
There are some very minor issues there that we are ongoing with the contractor there before we would call that project 100% complete, and that is in regard with some minor defects in terms of the roof over the reservoir itself, not having enough fall in a couple of locations. So we're working to get that rectified through the contract process, and then we'll be able to report that it's 100% complete. It is practically complete. It's functioning, and as councillors have pointed out previously, we're reaping the benefits of that project with no boiled water alerts in the scheme in this calendar year.
And lastly, we're talking on completion dates. Last night I was at a meeting and there was a lot of builders and construction people there, and I didn't realise it, but the major concern that all these builders and construction companies are having is supply of products. Now, when they're quoting, they're putting the bottom line is we're going to re-quote before we start because they can't get product because of a few reasons. One is stimulus packages. There's causing a lot of construction. We've got first home buyers. We've got the COVID impact. People are spending locally. It just goes on and on and on while we're so short of. And is it affecting council in any way? Shortage of supplies?
Through the chair, absolutely it is. On top of that, the civil construction market is really hot at the moment, and I guess if I go back to that, some of the commentary I made around some prices that are coming in for some of these works where we're seeing, I talked about Works of Queensland, more than double what we had anticipated that they would be coming in based on some prices not that long ago. But yes, we're certainly seeing issues in terms of delivery of materials, supplies, and we're seeing that reflected absolutely in prices from the market where they're coming in pricing works for us.
Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, while we're on this, Dave, sorry, how's the footpath renewal in Silkwood going? I know due to weather there would be hiccups, but yeah.
I think through the chair, that gave Mr. Sanders' response to that. I won't go anything.
Morning, Mr. Sanders.
Good morning, everyone.
Sanders.
Through the chair, the works are progressing well out there at Silkwood. We're anticipating completion within 3 to 4 weeks. There's been some significant progress this week despite the weather, so we're looking forward to that project being completed.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Sanders or Mr. Goodman? Councillor Pervin.
Yes, Mr. Goodman. Just in the report there, the Ernest Street Coles between Cairns Hardware and Coles, I see it's programmed. Whereabouts are we at with that?
Through the chair, so we did have an extension of time on the tenders there because we on inspection and liaising with the water department, there was a decision made to renew the water main while we were there. So we did provide tenderers an extension of time. So the original tender closing date was the 14th of May, and that we gave them a week extension. So we have received the tenders. We've received 3 tenders, and we'll be coming to council shortly with the recommendation on proceeding with that as soon as possible.
Could you just give us a scope of works, what's involved, what's going to happen there?
Yeah, so through the chair, we've it's a full pavement rehabilitation, so and curb and channel and water main renewal. So you will get the full extent of that. We're not changing levels too much. Obviously, we've got to work within the existing environment that we've got there. There's obviously restrictions when you're in a built-up area. However, that is extensively what it is. So around a 380 to 400 mil pavement replacement, asphalt surfacing, and new curb and channel.
Thanks, Mr. Sanders. Just didn't want to just get potholes fixed and fixed. That was also, thank you for clearing that up.
No worries.
One more. Well, I think it's probably Mr. Goodman. The Eddie Bay toilets in the report there. What stage are they at? Are they just has work commenced down there? Do you know?
Through the chair, I don't have a intimate knowledge of that project. I understand the work's commenced, but I'll take that on notice and give you a detailed response if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Goodman. Any further questions for the officers? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to 4, Governance, Environment and Finance, 4.1, page 47, Enterprise Risk Management Strategic Corporate Risk Register, and Ms. Kerr will present this report.
Good morning, Ms. Kerr.
Good morning,
Morning.
everybody. Council has reviewed our Strategic Corporate Risk Register over the course of 2-day workshops in late 2020. Strategic risk management is an important tool when developing our corporate plan, and a key strategy identified in the corporate plan is to build an organisational culture that values risk management, facilitates the development of risk mitigation measures that are proportionate to the issues at hand, and capitalises on opportunities. On the second page of the covering report, we have our strategic corporate risks listed in order of residual risk rating from highest to lowest. And our major change that we saw in our current review was our keeping up with technology moved up to the top of the list with a residual risk rating of a high 80. So we'll be focusing on information services strategies throughout the year to mitigate some of the consequences in that risk. Attached to the report are all the strategic risks and is recommended for adoption today by Council.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kerr.
I'm doing the next one.
And you're doing the next one? 4.2, page 73, Corporate Plan 2021-2025. Ms.
Thank
Kerr.
you. Thank you. As per the Local Government Act and the Local Government Reg, Council is required to prepare a 5-year corporate plan. The corporate plan is a high-level strategic document that sets the direction for Council for the next 5 years, and it is one of the most significant planning documents to be adopted by Council and provides the framework to guide the organisation along its set direction and priority issues for the region. I'm sure councillors will join me in thanking the community and the Community Consultative Group for their input during this process, and the final version of the corporate plan is attached to the report for adoption today.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd just like to thank not only the councillors but also the general public who put so much work into this corporate plan, because this is what we run by. This is our Bible as a council, you could say. So I'd just like to thank the input from all those involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Any further comments? Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, following on from Councillor Barnes, I think it's a great effort by staff as well, giving us a bit of inside info. It's our first corporate plan for a lot of us, and I know I went in wasn't knowing what I was doing, and appreciate all the guidance we've been given. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pervin. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One typo out of me. Sorry. The corporate plan does say there's 4 key
There's
goals.
5.
There are 5.
My apologies.
No, that's okay. And I should have picked it up earlier when I read it and made a comment. I think another key thing for us to speak about today is this corporate plan is a very high-level document. Some community members believe there's not enough detail within it, or it doesn't come down to enough, which I believe that sort of data and detail will sit in our operational plan. And I do know that there's discussions around, even though it's no longer a statutory requirement to have a community plan, I believe Council's considering putting a community plan in place, and that's another great avenue for us to use the engagement group and the broader community to have some input into what's going on in the region. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further comments, councillors? I'd just like to make a comment in relation to who owns this document. This is the community's document. It's not just driven by council, and the community engagement panel had intense knowledge of the draft, and they made recommendations. The community gave us recommendations. Importantly, there are 5 key goals and 35 strategies, and based on the 35 strategies, just like to acknowledge Mr. Singh, who's acting CEO today. Mr. Singh, could you prepare a report around the 35 strategies so council can give some consideration to further savings? Clearly, we need to trim the fat, and we're doing a budget at the moment, so any help we can get from the staff about opportunities to cut and save could be hidden in those 35 strategies. So could you prepare a report for a month's time, say, so we can have some consideration in our budget workshop? Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll take that on notice and come up with a report at a later date.
Thank you very much. Any further comments, councillors? Would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kurt. Move on to 4.3, page 91, the finance report, and Ms. Bradley will present this report. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Ms. Bradley.
So first up today, we have our monthly council report for the period ending 30th of April 2021. So council adopted its original budget on the 7th of July 2020. After that, RB1 budget review was then adopted on the 12th of November, and RB2 budget review was then adopted on the 25th of February, which is what's reflected in these reports. Council's year-to-date revenue expenditure across all departments, programs and services have been provided in this report. It also includes financial statistical data which highlights Council's operations to date. So some of the key highlights include our operational revenue, which is currently sitting at 88.7 million, which is 536,000 under budget in comparison to the budget of 89.3 million. Operational expenditure is currently sitting at 79.3 million, which is 655,000 under budget in comparison with the full budget of 79.9 million. The end of month cash balance was at 48.1 million, and capital expenditure for the month of April totaled 2.9 million, with the year-to-date capital expenditure including commitments sitting at 39.5 million. Which represents 58% of the budget being consumed, excluding commitments, or 76% of the budget consumed, including commitments. So the operating performance you can see in the first table, year-to-date operating results sitting at 9.44 million, with a year-to-date budget sitting at 9.32 million. So at this stage, we're 119,000 ahead of budget. From a financial sustainability perspective, our operating surplus ratio is currently sitting at 10.65%, which is just over the targeted threshold, but that will peel back as we see expenditure come through over the next 2 months. Asset sustainability ratio is currently sitting at 94%, which is above the target being greater than 90%. And our net financial liabilities ratio is sitting at minus 39.97, which is also within the targeted range, being under 60%. The next table details our financial results as at the 30th of April. The key things to note in here are our fees and charges, currently tracking 226,000 over budget due to increased rate searches, building applications and inspections, trade waste and camping fees, offset by reduced landing fees at our aerodromes as well as development applications. Interest is currently tracking under budget by 247,000 due to lower than anticipated interest rates for the year. It is anticipated that interest will be around 282,000 under budget at the end of financial year. So that is a budget risk that we have highlighted in the forecast. Operating grants is tracking 388,000 under budget due to Innisfail Bowls Club erosion grant yet to be finalised, offset by Works for Queensland funding that has been received in relation to projects completed last financial year, as well as the receipt of the second payment of the Coastal Adaptation Strategic Plan. The next item to note is other revenue sources, currently tracking 258,000 over budget due to COVID-related rebates for our apprentices and trainees across the organisation, as well as caravan park rates reimbursements. Employee expenditure, as you can see, is currently tracking 855,000 under budget due to vacant positions that are being held, not able to be filled, offset by an increase in contract labour. The forecast has been adjusted for that budget risk also. Materials and services is currently tracking 597,000 over budget, relating to the timing of invoices, under budget, my apologies, relating to timing of invoices for contractor services, external consultants, reduced marketing costs and reduced fuel costs, offset by increased plant hire and emergent works totalling 517,000. Depreciation is also tracking over budget by 645,000, predominantly relating to water, intangible assets, sewerage and plant and equipment. Capital grants are currently tracking 462,000 over budget due to DRFA funding that's been received. Capital contributions are also tracking over budget by around a bit over 1 million due to increased developer contributions, contributed assets resulting in new dressing rooms, or resulting from new dressing rooms constructed at Calendar Park and Castor Park. Gain on asset disposal relates to the sale of some of our fleet items, offset by loss on disposal from the timing of completion of our capital works, predominantly in the roads, bridges and footpaths. From an investment performance perspective, as I mentioned, Council had 48.1 million in the bank at the end of the month, with an average interest rate of 0.57%, which isn't exciting, but still we are managing to put our money wherever we can get the highest interest rate. From a capital perspective, I know Dave just gave an update on that. Year-to-date capital expenditure at the end of April was sitting at 30.3 million. Year-to-date commitments currently sitting at 9.2 million, which represents the 58% of the budget expended. Budget risks are continuing to be monitored and have been factored into the forecast figures you saw in that table. Those include Port Hinchinbrook sewage related expenditure, depreciation, interest on investments, Victory Creek arbitration costs and NDRRA emergent works for the 3 events that we've had this financial year. It's anticipated that these will be partially offset by an underspend in employee expenditure as mentioned, as well as increased revenue associated with the Works for Queensland grant funding and the JobKeeper COVID rebates that we've been receiving. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the officer? I'd like to go to page 93, item 7. Mr Singh's always telling us to be strategic around depreciation. It's a big challenge. I think it sits about 28 million currently. Could you give us a definition of intangible assets and why that depreciation has got up 158,000?
Certainly. So our intangible assets that we have in our asset register relate predominantly to our software, which is Tech One software. As well as another application that we use. So last year, Council made a decision to capitalise one of our software applications that we have been doing a significant amount of work in. And as a result, instead of seeing that expenditure run through our operational budget through materials and services, we've capitalised that. So now we're seeing that expense come through as depreciation on the intangible asset.
Okay, I understood water and sewage, but I couldn't understand intangible assets. So thank you for the description.
Not a problem.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Purvin, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item 4.4, page 106, the budget review, and Ms Bradley will present.
Thank you. So a budget review has been carried out for the 10-month period up until the month ending 30th of April. So to promote sound financial management and accountability, we have directors and managers review in detail their operational capital budgets. So the operational budget for 2021 required the proposed amendments in this report, incorporating some additional revenue that's offset by associated expenditure, budget risks that were able to be mitigated, as well as monthly phasing adjustments. A review's also been undertaken on Council's capacity to deliver our capital budget, resulting in the recognition of additional revenue and associated expenditure due to grant funding. The proposed deferral of a number of capital projects from the 2021 capital budget into the following year, also due to the reduced ability to deliver on those projects. So there are no changes proposed to our long-term financial plan as a result of this report, and these will be reviewed as part of the 21-22 budget. So from a capital perspective, there are two attachments to this report that detail or have the summary as well as the detailed movements of the changes to those capital projects. So at 30th of April, when this report was run, Council had spent 61% of its capital budget excluding commitments and 80% including commitments, which are detailed in Table A. The budget review analysed the capital spend to date and the budget which has resulted in the proposed reallocation within programs, as well as the deferral of some projects due to Council's ability to deliver. So as per the previous budget review, instead of realising significant carryover projects at the end of the financial year, Council officers have been proactively assessing our capital works and how we're travelling as the year progresses. So this has resulted in some proposed deferral of those projects, as it believes that we will not be able to commence those projects. This is a net 520,000 of projects deferred. This enables Council to focus our efforts on some of our big ticket items that have due dates effectively, and with those critical funding deadlines being met. $2.58 million reduction is proposed in this budget review, including $350,000 of projects in footpath renewals to be deferred. Under infrastructure, we have had the reduction in DRFA for the January-February 19 event. Capital budgets reduced due to under expenditure on the approved submission values, being $2.04 million. In addition to adjustments between capital projects and $40,000 that has been transferred back from reserves that was previously deferred in the last budget review. Fleet budget has been proposed to be reallocated to waste own assets for items relating to the setup of the transfer stations. Some minor adjustments between capital projects in Chief Executive and Water and Sewerage sections. And in waste, the deferral of $225,000 worth of projects for transfer station upgrades and reallocation of budget from fleet for those transfer station items I just mentioned. From an operating perspective, so a review has been undertaken on that budget to the end of April, with the table below highlighting Council's current financial position at the end of April and the full year forecast incorporating the known budget risks. The review has identified some minor adjustments of revenue and expenditure required between departments and programs, as well as the recognition of additional grant funding expenditure. So this will have a nil effect on the bottom line of the original budget. So in Table B, fairly similar to what we just looked at in the previous report, but this is brought in our new proposed new budget. So the key items to note here is our fees and charges are still tracking over budget due to those increased rate searches and building searches. Interest still tracking under budget, and the forecast figures have been updated to drop interest revenue from 1.3 million down to 1.02 million. Other revenue sources are still tracking over budget due to those COVID-related rebates. Year-to-date employee expenditure, the full year budget has been reduced in the forecast from 25.7 million down to a forecast of 24.7 million. Materials and services still tracking under budget due to those reduced fuel costs, external consultants, etc., with the full year forecast being adjusted for those budget risks, and depreciation, as we just spoke about, also over budget. Finance costs are currently tracking over budget due to the winding back of our refuse restoration provision. Year-to-date depreciation, I have mentioned. Gain on asset disposal is also tracking over budget, with the full year budget being increased due to the impact of the 3 NDRRA events that took place during the year. So over the last quarter, it's been noted that some changes are required to budget line items within various programs of council. And as I mentioned at this stage, there's no proposed increase or decrease in the operating budget position. And these are all detailed in Appendix C and D.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any questions for the officer? I'd just like to make a comment about the item on page 107 around waste and the deferral. Council made a decision that we would take over management of the transfer stations August 1. That's actually 8 weeks away. So I know our staff have got everything on track, but in particular, some of the deferral was around having to fund the self-serve at Cardwell and Bells Creek. So I believe the deferrals, while they can be criticised by some in the community, there is justification for it. We made a decision strategically to take over transfer stations, and that meant our staff had to shuffle some of the projects around. So fully justified in terms of the deferrals that have occurred, in my opinion. Any further comments, councillors? Somebody move the recommendation. Councillor Baines, second by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 4.5, page 120, schedule of fees and charges, and Ms Bradley will present this report.
Thank you. Me again. So in front of you now, we have our fees and charges schedule proposed for our 21-22 financial year, which have been reviewed. So whilst our main source of revenue is our rates and utilities charges, fees and charges revenue generated is approximately 2.6 million, equating to around 3% of our operating revenue. So there are 819 fees and charges in total in our schedule, with 387 of those remaining unchanged or reduced. A total of 90 fees have been discontinued and 60 new fees have been added into the schedule. Where considered appropriate, an increase in the order of 2% has been recommended in line with LGAQ's Council Cost Index to 432 fees. So a copy of the fees and charges has been included with this agenda item as it's a significant document. So some of the changes that we're seeing here, so in relation to finance, we've seen minor increases in line with our Council Cost Index or CCI, as well as some rounding adjustments to the majority of the fees in this section. The fee for standard and urgent water meter reading has increased in line with the cost of the provision of those services. In libraries, photocopying fees have not increased. Meeting room hire fees have been standardised across our regional libraries and disaster centres instead of recognising separate fees for each of our venues. With the renovations complete, as was mentioned earlier, at the Mission Beach Library, a coffee machine has also been installed and a new fee has been introduced to recover the costs associated with that service. Not-for-profit and charitable groups will continue to be entitled to 50% reduction in the hire fee for those meeting room, as well as the full fee may be offset by council donation in accordance with our council policies and procedures. Mooring fees, following on from the 2021 mooring fees at the Johnston River Boat Harbour, have increased broadly by 25% to be comparable with other moorings within our region and neighbouring councils. These fees have been increased to be closer to cost recovery. Equipment hire, so fees for equipment hire such as marquees and portaloos have been discontinued, and this service will no longer be provided to the community by council, as the costs involved in providing this service were not able to recoup all of those. So this will provide local businesses the opportunity to provide this service to the community, or alternatively, encourage groups to purchase this equipment themselves. Eligible groups may be able to access a community grant to purchase or to assist with the purchase of that equipment, as well as accessing the hire of large marquees to council through this process, the community assistance process. So nurseries, new fees have been added to the schedule for bulk plant purchases. So these are targeted towards commercial requests for plants with a discount scale depending on the number of plants purchased, and is comparable with other nursery operations. Visitor information centres, so the membership fee for tourism and business operators, which enables them to display brochure in our VIX, has increased to $195. So this is in line with Tropical Coast Tourism's fees, so we aren't seen to be competing with them. Meeting room hire fees have also increased to be comparable with our library facilities, and once again, not-for-profit and charitable groups will be entitled to the 50% reduction in that hire fee, and that full fee may be offset by council donation. Family daycare fees. So the educator administration fee per child per hour has increased from $1.90 to $2.05 to cover costs associated with the service provision that operates under a user pay system. Environmental services and prescribed activities have seen a general increase in line with our council cost index, and an admin fee for overgrown allotments has been increased by $30 to $480 per event. In animal management, our regulated, which is our dangerous, menacing and restricted dog registrations, have increased by 10% to $550. Release fees for the second release and third and subsequent releases have also been increased to encourage responsible pet ownership by cat and dog owners. In waste, the state government waste levy will increase on the 1st of July 2021 by $5 per tonne to $85 per tonne plus GST on applicable waste streams. So in addition to the waste levy changes, the base fees have increased by council cost index except for commercial wet waste, which has seen no change in that base fee, just the increase in the waste levy component. Construction and demolition, as well as construction and industrial fees, have been benchmarked with neighbouring councils to ensure that Cassowary Coast remains competitive. Charges for commercial separated cardboard have increased to $25 per cubic metre and increased to $75 per tonne to cover the costs of transporting that cardboard to the recycler as a result of the change in waste operations that was previously undertaken under that contract. Domestic quantities of green waste, recyclable material and domestic waste will continue to be free of charge at council's transfer stations. In planning, we've seen minimal increases in line with our council cost index that have been applied against some of the planning fees, with no increase being applied to developer contributions. So this decision was made in order to encourage growth within our region and stimulate the local economy. New business application fee and pre-lodgement advice and inquiry fees will continue to be provided at no charge to assist those making lodgements to ensure their applications meet council requirements. In water and sewerage, there's been minimal increases across those fees, mostly in line with the council cost index or the cost of provision of those services. New fees have been added for backflow device register maintenance and compliance testing. However, there will be no charge for these fees until after the expiry of the amnesty period, which ends in February 2023. In aerodromes, to assist with cost recovery of operating those aerodromes, landing fees for itinerant aircraft across the region have been increased. Annual fees for commercial aircraft based at Tully and Dalakey aerodromes have also been increased to bring them in line proportionately with Mundu Aerodrome. Not-for-profit organisations based at those aerodromes are also entitled to the 50% reduction in that annual fee. Camping, so our caravan park and campground fees for River Drive, Cowley Beach, Curramine Beach, Bingle Bay and Tully have been combined under one heading for peak and off-peak rates. So this is based on industry best practice to encourage the use of our caravan parks during the period of 1st of November to 31st of March, with lower fees being applicable during that time. And the peak season will be from 1st of April, and there's an error in this report that should read the 31st of October, not the 21st, at a slightly higher rate to match demand levels. Hall hire, so fees for the Innisfail Shire Hall have been increased to assist with offsetting the costs of running that facility. And once again, not-for-profit and charitable groups will continue to be entitled to that 50% reduction, as well as the full offset may be considered under council's policies. Fees for other halls have increased to attempt to recover costs associated with maintaining those facilities, and camping fees at Pease Park and Innisfail have been discontinued to encourage use of the improved River Drive Caravan Park. The Tully Civic Centre, where we are today, Chambers hire has been removed from council's fees and charges to encourage the use of our fantastic facilities at the Tully Grandstand. In swimming pools, lastly, our Mission Beach Aquatic Centre fees have been discontinued due to the change in ownership. It's now under a management agreement, so they set their fees. So with the above changes noted in fees and charges for 21-22, it's proposed that council adopt those fees and charges.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any questions? Councillor Chewy.
Thanks, Ms Bradley. Through the chair, just regarding the equipment hire, I think it's a great opportunity for businesses to take on that responsibility or service to the community. I'm wondering if there is a list available for people in the various areas of our region that businesses might provide to council, and listing what services or what equipment they have to hire, and whether that would be available if people were to inquire. Thank you.
Through the chair, the maintenance delivery team have been compiling a list of those businesses, and we'll be sending a letter out to all previous historic users of our equipment hire so that they can access or they know where to go to in order to receive those equipment.
Just on that point, good point, Councillor Chewy. That's on note 4. Also involved in the change in policy direction is that council is saying to groups that they should try and access a community grant. That's state government, federal government and local government, but just be aware our bucket is only 30,000 and we allocate 10 community grants capped at 3,000. So we're limited in what we can do to help unless we fill that bucket up a bit more, and that's a decision we'll make in the budget currently being deliberated. But it's about helping locals supply the equipment, but clubs can help themselves by getting a grant and buying their own. I just want 2 questions for Ms Bradley. What about Anzac Day? We always put up a council marquee for the returned soldiers and their partners and family, and cemeteries. We've always put marquees up at the cemetery. Will that still continue?
I might pass over to Mr Sanders, perhaps, if he's not in the room. Mr Sadler.
Mr Sadler.
Thank you for your question, Mr Chair, Mr Mayor. So civic events like Anzac Day will continue as we have in the past. So the setup of major marquees and things like that we do for Anzac Day will continue. In relation to service for cemeteries, that will continue as well as we do now. Yep.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Councillor Baines?
Well, one comment straight up, and firstly it goes to Leah and her team and Mr Singh and her team, but I'd like to thank all the councillors at the table for that, and her team and his team. They both have teams. Well, it was Liz. Yes. All right. Thank you for the correction. Now I'm thanking most of the councillors at the table. No. I'd like to thank all the councillors at the table too for the significant work that was done in this space and a lot of strategic direction. You know, the 2 great highlights for me out of this is the increase in fines towards irresponsible pet owners, and I think that's a great and very brave piece to take. Most of our pet owners in the region are quite responsible, but there's a lesson coming out of this. If you're going to be irresponsible with your pets, there's a stick that council can start flicking around. And the other great one that came out of it for me was the adjustments in the tube stock prices for large job lots. There's a significant amount of money and projects coming out of the federal government and the state governments at the moment about riparian repair and replantings. There is not a significant commercial nursery within the region, or not a really large one, and a couple of the smaller NRM groups are already doing their own works, but they can't keep up. There has been under the previous pricing, and I'm not saying it's just pricing, but some of these NRM groups have been going outside of our region looking to source their tube stock for these replantings, and this new pricing structure around that is going to allow them to purchase the trees locally. There'll be endemic species coming out of our own seed sourcing. We source the seeds ourselves, and I think it's going to be a great piece around building our nurseries up and making them more capable. There's going to be millions of dollars thrown into this space in the next few years, and our nurseries and our local groups should be benefiting out of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further comments, questions? Just like to go to page 121, note 12, to clarify that while there's an amnesty in place on this fee, February 2023. This is actually state government compliance. This is not something driven by council in terms of our strategic direction. Just like the waste levy, just like the grease trap installation, council copped all the blame for it, but we're actually complying with mandatory state government requirements. So the backflow device register maintenance and compliance testing is forced on us by the state government. That fee hasn't been driven by council. Any further questions? Would somebody move the recommendation? Councillor Tui, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 4.6, page 169, the policy review, entertainment hospitality expenditure policy, and Miss Bradley's earning her wages today. Miss Bradley will present.
Thank you. Good morning. So last but not least, the report I have in front of you today is for two policies, one being the entertainment and hospitality expenditure policy, and the second being employee travel and accommodation policy. So regularly reviewing policies and procedures keeps councillors, council staff and other stakeholders up to date with regulations, technology and industry best practice. So the policy review ensures that we remain consistent, current and relevant, while also providing clarity to the reader when dealing with accountability issues and activities that are critical importance to council, such as health and safety, legal liability and regulatory requirements. So the report, it's not proposed that any changes are made to either of these two policies other than to extend the review period out to 2 years rather than the 1 year that was in the original policy. So the entertainment and hospitality policy provides a working framework to manage our hospitality and entertainment expenditure, meeting requirements under the local government regulations. So it clarifies expenditure definitions and guidelines in detail and enables those within its scope to better utilise the policy. It provides details around fringe benefit tax, enabling us to meet our statutory obligations, and also defines unreasonable and inappropriate expenditure. So it also has the approval form with costing guidelines, and the form is to be used for pre-approval of the entertainment and hospitality expenditure under the guidelines. The second policy is our travel and accommodation policy, which provides guidelines for travel and accommodation arrangements for council employees attending official council business. So it defines how travel arrangements are to be made, giving more visibility over travel costs across the organisation. The policy also states what is and not allowable council expense and clarifies the maximum amounts claimable for meals. The standard of airfare and accommodation is also stipulated within this policy, providing clarification to employees. The policy ensures that council maintains accountability of public monies and that travel and conference and training arrangements are administered in the most cost-effective and efficient manner. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any questions? Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Bradley.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bradley.
We now move on to item 5, planning services, 5.1, page 186, application for reduction in infrastructure charges, and Mr Jones will present this report. Welcome, Mr Jones.
Good morning, everybody. Through the Chair, Council is in receipt of a request from Mark and Sharon Frankel for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges relating to the reconfiguration of a lot, 1 into 2 lots on land described as Lot 4 RP 747532, situated at Illich Street, Curramine Beach. The application was approved by Council via delegated authority, subject to conditions on the 28th of April 2021, the decision notice being issued on the 5th of May. An infrastructure charge notice was also issued for the amount of $17,603.73. The proposed development meets the criteria for eligible development outlined within the policy, and it is recommended that the request for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to 5th of May 2024, which gives 3 years to complete the development, Council. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Jones. Any questions of the officer? I just want to pay a compliment to the previous council and planning staff for the introduction of this policy. It continues to be one of the most successful implemented in that previous term, and our community are benefiting from it, and our building stats are further testament when you hear Mr Horton present later how much property searches, etc., is going on, and the increase in DAs around that area. It's been a great initiative, in my opinion. Any questions for Mr. Jones? Would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Farinelli. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. I note Councillor Chewy's out of the room. Yep. Move on to item 5.2, page 194, application for reduction in infrastructure charges, and Mr. Jones will present this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Chair, Council is in receipt of a request from Joseph and Vera Sendra, trading as Sendra Holdings Trust, for 100% reduction in the infrastructure charges relating to the reconfiguration of a lot, 1 into 2 lots on land described as Lot 60 RP 705581, situated at 65 Marillion Road, East Innisfail. The application was approved by Council via delegated authority, subject to conditions on the 6th of May, the decision notice being issued on the 10th of May. An infrastructure charges notice was issued for the amount of $29,339.55. The proposed development meets the eligibility criteria contained within the policy. It is recommended that the request for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to 10th of May 2024. Council, this particular development's just like to highlight the fact that we're starting to see that infill development in East Innisfail, which is really good to see because it takes up, we've got that infrastructure there at the moment which needs to be at full capacity. So this type of development contributes to that infrastructure being up at the required service level. So look, it's an exciting one for us. A 1 into 2, it creates an opportunity for 2 new houses to be built in that particular location, and also gives a little bit of rejuvenation of that area too. And we're hoping to see a fair bit more of this as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Councillor Farinelli, move the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Baines. Any further commentary? No? All in favour?
No,
Carried unanimously.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
That's all right. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Sorry, mate. Item 5.3, page 202, delegation report and current applications, and Mr. Horton will present this report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Welcome,
Thanks,
Mr.
Council. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, I'm not late today. No. Council, on page 204, the planning applications to date for the month of April, we're up 59 applications on the same time last year, so that's an improve for ourselves. I'd say a lot of that's on the back of the building progress, Mr. Mayor, as well. Overall, on the 5-year for the dwelling approvals for the month of April, we're up 28 dwellings on top of the best for that 5-year period, so which is tracking nicely. 61 overall in the total approvals, and that's up over that 5-year period. That's the best we've had for the last 5. In April, we had 46 total approvals that we did for the month. There was $6.8 million worth of approvals that we had there, Council. To date, progressive for this calendar year, we got 25.4 million overall total. However, most of that's made up with dwellings of 18.2 million. So that's good total, Council. It really is nice to see for that. So over the 3 years, in the comparison, we're 61 applications up. That's on page 212, Council, over the 3-year period, which is tracking nicely as well. I suppose the biggest one on page 215, Council, is we actually approved more Class 1A dwellings than we did sheds for the first time in a long time. So
Councillor Raleigh would be delighted.
I was going to say ex-Councillor Raleigh would be absolutely delighted.
I was going to say, it's we haven't seen that for a long time, but it's nice to see it swing the other way. So hopefully we'll continue. We'll see how we track, Council. Overall, for the dwelling approvals for the 1920 for the financial, I did a bit of a calculation over the 6-month period. Last year we did, for the 6-month period of November to April, we did 34 approvals for dwellings. This year we've done 74, so we're 43 up for the same 6-month period. Considering a lot of our averages are around 6 and 7 a month, to have that on top is part of the grant regime, which is great. People are spending money, everyone's busy, which is nice. So
Total comparison is 3.1, council. So overall, for the financial year, we're up 100 approvals on last year in our overall total. So that shows a bit around our fees and charges and in our budgets, council. So in that comparison as well, we're 13.8 million up on the financial year at the same time through that July to June period from last year. So that's nice to see in the area. And building, well, we did 78 inspections for the month, 27 in plumbing. You get a bit less in plumbing because of the weather, really takes a hit, so forth. But the other one is good, councils, the searches, we're 29 up on last year, so in April, just for this month. So there is people around and interested in purchasing. So yeah, council, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr Horton? Councillor Baines.
Again, compliments, great work. It's going to give me the opportunity to jump into the question I didn't get to ask the last time around. Because Mr Horton, you did mention the incentive program seems to be working as well. And I think an important point the community needs to understand, because I get told sometimes that we're giving developers hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's not the point about this incentive program at all. It's about attracting development into the infrastructure priority areas where all the infrastructure is already there, and intensifying the dwellings or getting more people into the region. You know, 2 lots, 1 house lot all of a sudden becomes 2 house lots. You get a couple of sets of rates. So it's a different part of the. We're not just giving money away to people. It's money that we wouldn't have had to start with. Is that right?
Yeah, through the chair, we're foregoing
Yes.
into infrastructure charges. However, yeah, the benefit for rating purposes and so forth moving forward outweighs it at the current time.
Yeah.
Look, you're trying to get infill, you're trying to put more value on the asset that you currently got, council. You know, we've got sewerage that's underutilised, and we know that around the Mission Beach area and a number of other areas. So for us, our focus is trying to do that, trying to get more infill and more density around units. You know, look, the grant's been a great asset to, you know, the whole of Australia, you know, not only Queensland but South East Queensland, the whole of Queensland, you know, and it's a benefit, you know, and it's great to see that, you know, people are investing in the area, and it's good to see that the younger generation is investing in the area and building new homes as well. So, and some people are renovating or upgrading their home with new roofs and so forth. So yeah, look, council will seek to approve that as we go through and do the new planning scheme, and work forward in that manner of trying to get as much as we can on our assets.
Thank you, Mr Horton. Any further questions? Just a comment about all the good stats you've just read out. Could we get comms to do a piece about how houses are actually surpassing sheds now, which is a big turnaround for us in terms of our history. The sad side of what's happening is a lot of homes are being sold and they're rentals. I got an email from a gentleman last night who's going to lose his home. It's been sold under him, and he's going to have to live in his car. So he's resigned to the fact that he's going to have to live rough for a while. But I'm hearing that everywhere. A lot of people that are renting are being moved out because the homes are being sold from under them. And while that's good for our economy, there is a social side that's going to be negative, and that's an example of it.
Yeah, through the chair, definitely is a social issue. It's been discussed, you know, through numerous avenues with the federal government, state government, and you hear it on the ABC. Yeah, there's a lot of issue around housing and rentals. Rentals are, you know, we've done some stats around our area. Yeah, there's not a lot around, Mr Mayor, so it is something that needs to be looked at. Which level of government that is the question, but yeah, it's going to get tougher, and yeah, and I suppose that's why a lot of people have looked at building new homes as part of this package.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Horton. I think across the nation it's going to increase because of COVID. The outbreak in Victoria is another example of they want to come to a COVID-free country, and North Queensland is the ideal spot for them to visit and maybe build a home because they want to stay healthy and safe. And COVID's going to drive our economy. Don't doubt about that at all. All right, any further questions for Mr Horton? Somebody move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Farinelli, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Horton.
Mr Horton.
We move on to general business. Are there any general business items? Councillor Chewy.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just have two items. We all know how important the Tully Show and Innisfail Show are to our area. The Tully Show Society have just created a newsletter, which I've left on every councillor's desk there. There's just a way of trying to increase what's going on. With COVID, people might be a little bit concerned that it won't happen. The show will happen. There will be slight changes. They are looking for volunteers to be stand on the gate and sort of keep things under control. And of course, you know, it's really important. It's such a big fundraiser for our local community groups, Scouts, Lions, Girl Guides, different things like that. So we encourage everybody to obviously attend the show as they normally would, but if they'd really like to get involved and volunteer, the email address is admin@tullyshow.com.au. And as I said, keep your eye out for the newsletters that will be around. I've been asked to deliver some to Mission Beach, which I have. They're in Cardwell, Tully. The schools were sent them all through an email. So just a way to keeping up to date with what's going on. And obviously the check-in app will be vital at the shows. So also, I just would also, my second piece for general is I would like to move that the submission received from Paradise Run, submitted by Mr. Randall, be acknowledged and forwarded to the appropriate officers for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a motion, is it?
That's a motion.
Would somebody second that motion before Mr Sadler talks to it? It's seconded by Councillor Barnes. Okay, over to you, Mr Sadler.
Through the chair, acknowledge receipt from Mr Russell from Paradise Run, who's actually in the gallery today, and it will go on to the appropriate team to be assessed or the design team.
Okay, thanks, Mr Sadler. Any further questions? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, yeah, I have got while Adam's there, I just got a question about the Alarish range and if
hang on, mate.
anybody...
We're in the middle of a motion.
Oh, in the motion.
You're not speaking
no,
to the motion,
sorry,
okay?
No.
So we've got a mover and a seconder. Any further discussions or questions on Mr Sadler?
Yeah,
It's an operational
What's it
matter.
actually about?
Adam, can you speak to it, please?
Yeah, sure. Through the chair, Mr Russell from Paradise Run has submitted a concept in relation to some outdoor activity equipment in the reserve in Mission Beach, just down from Castaways, particularly the location where the Paradise Run run their weekly running activities on a Saturday. So a concept has been received, and Mr Russell has asked us to consider the concept and work with the Paradise Run group in relation to how they might be able to move forward.
Any further questions? Councillor Farinelli.
So could you just read that motion again, just so that I know what we're voting on?
I move that the submission received from Paradise Run, submitted by Mr Randall Russell, be acknowledged and forwarded to the appropriate officers for consideration. Thank you.
Any further questions? We have a mover and a seconder. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Any further general business? Councillor Pervin.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I'll just hand this out to all the councillors.
Thank you. Oh yeah, sorry mate, sorry.
All right, through you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that Council establish a tourist information centre at the Conservatorium Theatre in Innisfail in a manner to be considered by Council following provision of information from relevant staff as to how this could be achieved. This would be for a 12-month trial basis.
Okay, thank you. Somebody second that motion? Seconded by Councillor Chewy. Councillors, any questions for Councillor Pervin in relation to the motion? I'd just like to make one supporting comment. The con is an ideal spot in terms of what's already there. It has a disabled toilet, it has disability access, it has 20 car parks joining the building. 2 of those are disabled, and it no doubt would add to the Hadrill Park River Drive hub that already exists along that strip, which is the main highway. I note in the motion that you're waiting on information from the relevant staff. So this will be led by our staff in terms of all the pros and cons. And I'll hand over to Mr. Sadler now just to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Pervin. As we know, visitor information centres, the models need to be agile and responsive to our customer needs. And I suppose we need to fish where the fish are, but also need to be multi-pronged in relation to social media, electronic information, as well as marketing and bricks and mortar. So in relation to the motion, happy to receive that and take that further with the officers, and in relation to looking at the accreditation process around doing so, and also other factors around parking and other pieces in relation to getting a great Vic. So things around experiences, site accessibility, and also the distance from the CBD. I suppose the location that we do have and has been put forward by Councillor Pervin is probably further away from the CBD where we currently are now, and may need to be considered in relation to technology pieces at that location, and also working with the community groups that do utilise the con, so the Friends of the Con and things like that. So from an officer perspective, that we can take that on board and come back to report to council in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. In terms of fishing where the fish are, the information centre used to be directly across the road until the lease ran out. It was very, very successful. And in terms of the con itself, it's an underutilised council asset. We're going through asset rationalisation, and I just see this as another user group going in there for the benefit of our economy and our community. I don't think you'll get any pushback from the existing groups that use the con. I've spoken to them, and they're receptive to this idea. But at the end of the day, we're going to be led by a report from the staff if Councillor Pervin's motion gets up today. Councillor Farinelli.
Through the chair, I won't be supporting this motion. I've had a bit of history with regards to visitor information services for Innisfail. I was actually part of the council that have initially put forward the IVAN, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who voted against it. And we're kind of seeing the results of that. That the community has realised that it hasn't been sufficient for our needs as far as standing information centre. It's great for destination and to get out to events, absolutely ideal for that. But we have been screaming out for, I believe, and the community has, for a standalone information centre. I believe we got it wrong back in the day when we made that decision, and I believe this is the wrong decision in my personal opinion. And having looked at the location criteria assessment that was provided to me by you and the people that I work under as part of my portfolio. So I've had a look at that assessment, have a little bit of experience in travelling around. I do think there are some serious concerns as far as parking, even though there is parking there, whether it is the right parking for the type of people who will be visiting and stopping to use the information centre. I personally think there would be some great opportunities around maybe with CMCA setting up at Hadrell Park, whether there is potential to work with them in providing some information, maybe some information there that would be very, very little cost to council, and also utilising some of the staff we've already got and volunteers in actually going on the ground, maybe with an iPad in hand and relate face to face with some of those travellers and providing on the spot information and maybe even targeting them towards tourism attractions directly as part of those conversations. Yeah, I just think while it has been a bit delayed in getting to actually looking at where we're going as far as visitor information centres as a council, I think we would be I hesitate to be hasty in making this decision. Because, as I said, I do believe we got it wrong once before, and I'd hate to see us get it wrong again because this is very vital. And I really do believe in the figures that you've provided to me as far as a location criteria, and therefore, and I know that your staff, Mr. Blanchard is ready with a report, ready to come to council with a bit more information in this area, and I really think it's worthwhile waiting for that. He has been very busy getting around with the iVan and trying to do destination marketing for our region. So, but that is ready to come to us. So why jump at this without just applying a little bit more time to really give it some thought? That would be my advice. But then, as I said, I'm only one vote, and I will be voting in.
Thank you, Councillor Farinelli. Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, through the chair. I also agree that a little bit more time needs to be spent on this area. I'm an avid traveller, and I do not think the con is the right area. I think that if you're going to stop at an information centre, it also needs to be an experience, and I don't think that the con is an experience. Maybe we should trial the iVan there first, but anyway, that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pervin. Thank you, Councillor Millwood.
Yes, thanks, fellow councillors. Councillor Farinelli, on the 23rd of July 2020, in general business, I brought up the question, after yourself tabling a letter from the Australian Sugar Museum, I brought up the idea of moving the information centre to the con. At that point in time, you couldn't get over me quick enough to say, oh, that's a great idea, Councillor Pervin. I really, really support you. Further from that, Mr. Sadler came to us and said that he'd present some further information on VIX. That was 10 months ago. I've been asking constantly about this. I've bitten the bullet. I've taken it up. The people are asking me. Hadrill Park has started. We put our first people into the River Drive Caravan Park yesterday. I would like to move this motion today, and I will move this motion.
Okay, we've had a mover and a seconder. Is there any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? That's Councillor Chewy, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Baines, Councillor Pervin and Nolan. Against? Councillor Farinelli and Millwood. Thank you. Any further general business? No, you go first, Councillor Baines.
Well, Mr. Mayor, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here, but I'm just about to step into the wonderful experience we had this morning.
That's it.
With the launch of Reconciliation Week in Queensland. So there was a function that was partnered with Council, with Reconciliation Queensland and Mammoo Health Services, and we attended upon the Tully Showgrounds, the wonderful facility up there, and the function was live streamed into Queensland Parliament. And it was a great piece to be part of. Now, correct me, Mr. Mayor, I think there was seven other regions. Six other regions that live streamed in. Cooktown, Cairns, Cassowary Coast, of course, and the loudest cheer was in that room from Cassowary Coast. Rockhampton, Isaac, and Mount Isa. Yeah, it was a really great event. It's the inaugural breakfast around Reconciliation Week, so I would suggest that means there'll be one in every year coming, and I think the participation will just grow and grow. As we Cassowary Coast Regional Council, we're already into our second reconciliation action plan stage, and great event, and I really thank everyone who came along, all the staff members. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. I just want to supplement your comments by putting a bit of a demographic on it. Cassowary Coast has 10% of Indigenous residents, compared with a nation average of 2.6. So we do have to stand up, and we do have to partner, and we do have to work together to bridge the gap, no doubt about it. It was a great event. The Honourable Governor Paul de Jersey did the launch from Queensland Parliament, and they talked about a bigger venue next time. They couldn't squeeze them in today. So, and I want to compliment Tully Rotary. It was a wonderful breakfast as well. Any further general business? Councillor Barnes.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A project that's been in the waiting for a long time is the dredging of Port Hinchinbrook For those of you who don't understand, a little bit of history, 1.5 million was given by the federal government of the time. We know it didn't have to go through a budget. We know it was just put on a shelf. We thought it was a straight through process. The council, I know, has been blamed by a very few people of dragging the chain, but those who know the truth, the council has done everything that's been asked of it, financially and staff-wise, and submitted that application back in the 18th of December 2020. It's got to an embarrassing situation. It's got to a unsafe situation. It's causing employment losses. It's causing we have Norship there. It's affecting their business. It's a shovel-ready job. It's affecting tourism operators, fishing operators, and the list goes on. I just don't know what more as a council we can do, or the public. Like, it's been sitting down there, as I said earlier, from the 18th of December. Do we have to go and sit on the steps of the Deputy Prime Minister to get time with him? Do we have to go and face-to-face Susan McDonald? I don't know if these politicians are aware that we haven't got it. I can't believe that they don't know. I know our CEO's been constantly, every 5 days, bombarding those who he has to, through one way or another. I just don't know where we're going as a council. Yeah, that's all I've got to say, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I'd just like to clarify for the public record, we didn't get 1.5 million. We actually got a blank cheque, and we were asked to go and do the background work. We funded 3 business studies that cost ratepayers around 50 grand. They were received by our staff, assessed, and forwarded back to the federal government. So there should be no embarrassment in our community or our council about the delay in delivering the dredging. It's a matter for the federal government, who made an election promise leading into the last federal election, and they gave our staff a blank cheque. So, and then we went and spent money, ratepayers' money, to do the business study. We've done everything to the letter of the law, and there should be no embarrassment whatsoever, not from us. Councillor Millwood.
So through the chair, further to that, Mr Mayor, so yeah, we're making it very clear that we actually haven't been given that $1.5 million. Yeah.
Unless I can be corrected, that's my understanding of all the media and all the workshops we've had with our staff. The cart before the horse, here's the money, but you go and prove that you deserve it. And our staff have been doing their best at that end, as well as spending 50 grand to do the business studies. So we've done every bit we've been required to do. Any further comments in general business? No more items? Okay, would somebody move that we close the meeting to the public? And the reason we're closing the meeting to the public is a confidential item, 7.1, page 226, considering the awarding of a contract for the disposal of CCRC wet waste. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We might have, hang on, Daniel, are we off? Okay, councillors, would somebody move that we reopen the meeting to the public? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 7.1, page 226, considering awarding of a contract for disposal of CCRC wet waste, and Mr Hammond will present this report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I advise Council that we've actually gone to tender to look at the disposal of wet waste. Our current contract expires on the 31st of July. We've been to the market via the LG tender box. One conforming tender was received. That tenderer is well known to our business, and we currently use that organisation to dispose of waste. They had some issues they had with the contract. We've looked at those, sought legal advice, and the contract has now been satisfied to the acceptance of both parties. The current contract is a little bit more than we're currently paying, but it's in line with market expectations. Can I recommend that the schedule of rates for contract COW000050 for the receipt and disposal of CCRC waste, that is the Cassowary Coast Regional Council wet waste, as submitted by Remondis Australia Proprietary Limited and FGF Development No. 1 Proprietary Limited be accepted on the grounds of 5 years, with an arrangement of 5 years, a plus 5 years at the conclusion of that first 5 years, at the price that they have submitted in their tender. Waste levy will be as set by the state government, pending their action 31st of July 2022. An indexation adjustment for year 2 to 5 be limited to the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the CPI index that they generate each year. In addition to that, I seek Council's acceptance to delegate authority to the CEO to take over further finalisation of that contract.
Thank you, Mr Hammond. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, I just got a couple of questions, Gavin. So given that the contract's 5 years with 5 years extension, is there an appetite to review this maybe after the 5 years, given that in talks with Lawmac there is a possibility that there could be a new type of waste disposal going through the MRF, which is a materials recovery facility in Cairns, and maybe there could be new negotiations there given we wait and see what's happening in that space.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, there is an opportunity. The current arrangements to our with our neighbours to the north will conclude in 2026, and the recommendation and timeframe has been set around to allow us to investigate fully any opportunities with MRF, any opportunities with regional waste disposal, which will come aboard in the next 5 years.
And further to that, on going out to tender, we only had one likely participant.
Thank you. We went to tender. There was only one conforming tender and only one tender.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. One question is, if our fluctuation in tonnes, I know you've stated how many tonnes we have been taking up in previous years. It goes either way, it's still the same dollars per tonne.
Thank you. The contract was asked for a price per tonne for disposal. They've given that price based on an indication of the tonnes we've received for the 2019-2020 year. There is no minimum number, there is no maximum number. So yes, the price is there regardless of what the volume is.
And further on, only recently I was talking to a COFCO representative, and they have a joint venture somewhere else in the world, I can't remember where it is, with a Japan company now. They've taken on a big project, and those Japan company is one of the ones that are burning the rubbish in their burners. So it's nice to see our local sugar mill having a marriage with that company. So down the line, who knows how many years, I can probably see a lot of our rubbish going through our two sugar mills in our shire.
At the moment, one of the state strategic directions is energy from waste. And certainly the state government is pushing heavily to make that happen. In our conversations and discussions in the next 5 years, that certainly will be one of the things we'll look at. And part of that is also the organics. So how we can manage with organics in the next couple of years as well, and how that might lead into an energy source for an energy from waste scenario.
Councillor Millwood, you're moving the motion, seconded by Councillor Chewy. Any further discussion? All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Hammond.
You're welcome.
That brings our meeting to a close at 5 minutes past 11. Thank you.